have the curiosity to understand the product or the service that you are trying to, sell, and you are good with people. See, because some basic tenets of marketing remain the same. You have to understand your user and customer really well, and you have to understand your product really well. It's about having those strong foundation. Yeah, the product is great or not, whether you've got your operational model right or not, and whether you have a good stream.
Hey there, welcome to Marketing Mavericks with Indy for You. We have Jayati Singh with us today, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Tally Solutions. Jayati's experience spans over 2 decades, where she's worked with some incredible companies like Philips, P&G, ABN AMRO, Brita Group, Usha International, and now Tally. We unpack this journey of hers, have a conversation around B2B marketing, staying relevant, and a lot more. Hey Jayati, thanks for your time and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Kavan. Great to be here. Looking forward.
I really appreciate you taking all the time. It's midweek madness, and I want to immediately get started with the questions. So the first thing I was very curious to know is, how did you stumble upon marketing as a career choice? If I'm not wrong, that isn't something you formally studied, right?
Right, you're right. So it's interesting actually. I was actually studying sociology at the Delhi School of Economics. And I was studying to be an academic or probably get into the media space. But it just so happened that P&G came on campus and I applied. And lo and behold, I was joining their batch of guinea pigs, as I used to refer to myself at that point in time, because that was the first time they were going beyond just the IIMs where they recruited from. And they came to D school. So I joined in sales, as a matter of fact. And, the first 3 years of my career was spent in running, or understanding rather, the distributor operations at P&G in Bombay. And post that, I moved into a function called marketing strategy and planning. Now that was a very interesting, because it's almost, if I think about it now, it was more like, let's say, trade marketing, in the normal parlance. But that was the time when I was working very closely with the global business units in P&G. So you got a lot of understanding of how, marketing was done, what were some of the key metrics, what were the key, the way insight mining would happen and things like that. So that was I would say, the first introduction to some of the marketing practices and, in action sort of, marketing operations. And after P&G in 2007, when I left, I joined Philips, and Philips was the time when I got into proper marketing. So while it was still at an India level and, there were business groups based out of other countries, but all the market specific marketing, right from understanding the consumer insight to developing communication around it to making sure that it sort of gets activated in the market, launch, everything was, to my mind, that was the formal dive into marketing for me. And that was a phenomenal experience for the next 7 years. Yes, it was not just marketing, it was complete P&L management. So you run a category, as a P&L head. So yeah, that's how marketing happened to me, and I've not looked back since then.
Fantastic. So many people today obsess over what should I study, what should be my first job, and often there's a lot of signaling which happens, on Instagram or their parents or their relatives, and they end up doing things and realizing maybe I don't like what I do, maybe when they're 25, 28, 30. So how did you decide to just, study one thing, then do sales and then jump into marketing? Like, what was going in your mind? And I ask you this because a lot of young, marketeers or young folks who are keen for advertising and marketing see this, and they may be engineers, they may be, art students, and they're just so scared and apprehensive if they'll be good compared to a top class MBA grad. So if you could just unpack your thoughts there, I'd be very curious. Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting. And, I sometimes, when I reflect on, my past and the way my career trajectory sort of moved, a lot of things happened because I went with the flow. I didn't stop myself from experimenting. And I was also curious to, try and learn different things on the way. And a lot of times I tell people, even when I used to go back to my campus to talk to them about, marketing as a career and profession, and I would always say that it really is not a science or even an art for that matter. It's a mix of both. And a lot depends on your own curiosity, your own intent and ability to learn and seek insights. Because what is marketing end of the day? It really is about, synthesizing the things that you observe and the insights that you gather from around you, and then working out, in a creative format. And that there are various legs to it, right? I mean,
Mhm.
there's, if you like, I was in product marketing, for a long time, and there's brand marketing. So these two are also two sort of separate, areas. And when you're doing product marketing and things, understanding the life cycle or the life, journey of the product, right from the insights to the development, understanding the concepts, testing it with the customer, what are the key RTBs that you want to really drive home, and then creating a creative communication along with the agency or, in-house and things like that. So it becomes like a complete spectrum. So when I started, like I mentioned, right, I started as a trade marketing manager. When I joined Philips, I was more into the country marketing sort of a role, not in the product development. But within Philips, I even did product development, with the garment care and irons and things like that. So I was curious to try out various aspects of marketing to make myself a sort of, how should I put it, an overall or a well-rounded marketer in that sense.
Right.
And fortunately or unfortunately for me, it wasn't really the advent of digital marketing that had happened until then. So we were more into the traditional format of marketing. So I would say it was, will I call it easier? Maybe not, but it was different. It
Hmm.
was different then. And you talked about the 360 marketing and all of those things. You just learned as you went along. So again, ultimately, I think for me, and the message that I would want to give is that seriously, no point deliberating too much. If you have the curiosity, if you want to try out, different things, and you think you have the ability to understand people, have the curiosity to understand the product or the service that you're trying to, sell, and you are good with people, I think you can almost try any job in the world for that matter. Yeah.
Well put. I think I whenever I'm asked to at least give my advice here, I usually say the same thing where your failure rate, can be high when you're young. So that's when you should get your hands dirty.
Absolutely
And only by getting your hands dirty is when you'll realize if you like something or not. Because,
true.
you know, learning, seeing, and then actually doing are all very different things.
Yeah.
And you never know, what you end up liking. Yeah.
True. And the other thing that I also tell a lot of people is, getting an understanding of how sales and all happen is also very important aspect
Mhm.
of your, especially if you're getting into marketing. I see a lot of people, shying away from, doing sales. They just think that, oh, bahut ghasai hai, And honestly, it's not that. It can be a fun thing as well. I'm not saying that I enjoyed every single day of going to stores and, selling Ariel and Tide and all of that. But actually, that is where you think both from a user and a shopper perspective, because you invariably meet some users, right, in the stores. You also meet shoppers. You're meeting the people who are selling it, and then to understand what are people's preferences and things like it just gives you so many, it really is a good source of understanding and knowledge to my mind. So I would
Yeah,
definitely encourage people to get a sense of how sales and operations happen as well.
absolutely. I my core job at Indiefolio is to do sales,
Yeah.
and the immediate feedback you get talking to a customer, you just can't beat that.
Correct.
You may
Correct.
be sitting in your fancy BKC office and trying to sell to tier two. You'll
Yeah.
never be able to understand exactly what
True.
is going wrong till you don't talk to people.
True.
So even I couldn't, recommend it more. I another aspect I wanted to cover in your journey is I see that there are two paths a lot of marketing leaders have taken. And one angle, I've interviewed a lot of people in this podcast who've, let's say, taken BFSI, build their career in that over like 20 years, 25 years, and say that I am the top leader there because I understand the market and the customer very well, and eventually I'll probably be a CEO at a company in this segment.
Right.
The other, folks, and I think that's something which I see in you, is there's a lot of versatility in the experience, right? Where
Mhm.
you've done electronics, BFSI, fintech now, and consumer as well, and that kind of tries to, it just kind of gets you a little bit more uncomfortable every time, and
Yeah.
you get a holistic understanding of marketing as a
Right.
function. So obviously there is no good and bad here, but if you could unpack, why would you let's say, recommend, what would you recommend to somebody from your personal experiences?
True.
What path one should probably opt for, and what are the pros and cons?
True. So for me, and initially in my career also, I did think that maybe sticking to a specific domain and a segment would be a great thing, to do. That you understand, you just know it so well, and you're an expert in it, and you gain mastery. And of course, things are evolving. So I mean, you don't become redundant at any point in time, because you have so much depth of understanding with respect to the product, the category, the customer, everything that has to do with it. Like I mentioned, that I was also curious, and I also sort of went with the flow at times. So for instance, after PNG for a brief while, and it also had to do, and especially being a woman in this field, it also had to do with my life stages. And that's something that I don't know how many people really talk about. But after PNG, I realized that I did want a job which didn't require me to travel. And that's when I actually joined the bank, because it meant that, yeah, I'll be in office, and I'll have these set hours, because the priorities were very different. But then I also realized that maybe this is not the sector and segment that I really enjoy as much, and I made a exit within a year and a half. And I realized that it was actually the consumer product, be it in the fast moving or durable segment, which was interesting, because it's making use of my existing strengths as well as giving me an opportunity to learn something new. So in fact, I still remember when I was interviewing for Philips, it has to do with the overall job, right? I mean, what is there at hand? I knew it was a P&L, job, that you're handling the end to end. So the decision rests with you in terms of how you run the overall category, and the largest category. So I think that aspect of sticking with the consumer understanding, and whether it was fast moving or durables, it didn't really matter at that point in time for me. See, because some basic tenets of marketing remain the same. You have to
Right.
understand your user and customer really well, and you have to understand your product really well. What is it that you're selling, be it a product or a service again. So if you have these two things kind of sorted, then using or leveraging various vehicles or media to talk about it becomes sort of easy, right? So that is what happened. Now, the next step with respect to the third switch that happened with B2B again was sort of with the flow, yet a conscious decision, because we moved to Bangalore. And being in Bangalore, I realized that IT would really make sense, because by the time here also, I worked with a German company for a little while on product, and I realized that it's becoming a little too similar, perhaps, in the kind of value that I'm adding. Maybe it's time to upskill myself a bit more. And B2B marketing was an interesting domain, because it's supposed to be, and it's a challenge also of sorts, right? Because B2B is not as glamorous, from outside. And like, yeah, take care. You have some, clients and enterprises and whatnot, and we're not always working with celebs and things like that. And
Correct.
it's very focused on the processes, systems, and all. But luckily with Tally, what I found was that it was as close as it could get to the end user marketing, because these are small businesses, right? So it was therefore a really good mix for me, from that sense, that it was as close as it could get to, a consumer or a customer product company. But at the same time, it was B2B, because the sizes of the businesses varied. And I could add a lot of value, plus in the process, I'll end up learning a lot as well. Yeah. So that really worked in my favor. So again, the point that I'm making is that, like you also said, right, there's no right or wrong. I mean, there's certain people who love a particular domain, and they want to really master that inside and out, and be known as experts. For me, it's been both. For me, like I said, because I was curious, I wanted to also experiment in various things. And I figured that, it's a good way that it's moving. And all these brands that I've worked with have been really great in that sense, right? I mean, Tally for MSMEs, it's a household name. So
Yeah.
there is a very strong value that I associate also with the company and the brand, that I associate myself with, or decide to work with. what are the values that they're working with, what is the the culture of the place as well. So I think that that is how, if you see, the longest time that I've spent in any company, it has been PNG, Philips, and now Tally. So that's how it's really
Got it.
moved.
Got it. I want you to unpack what you said a little bit earlier, which is tenets of marketing or first principles of marketing more or less remain same. And I'd love to know what are some first principles, you really, really believe in. I know you've done B2B, B2C, you've done all these, industries as well at various scales and geographies. So if you could just share your favorite first principles.
Sure. So, like I mentioned earlier, I think the first thing always is to understand your consumer and customer stroke shopper well, right? I mean, while being in FMCG and FMCD itself, it was very clear that the user may not necessarily be the shopper and vice
Mm,
versa, right? And when you're doing marketing, it has to pan across both. So you have to understand what are the motivations and what are the insights and what will make, again, thinking about the whole marketing funnel as you do, who is the influencer where, right? And that becomes important. And whether it's B2B or B2C, this aspect remains the same,
mm,
right?
mm.
So the marketing funnel, the basic principles of that whole thing around awareness, consideration, preference, and usage, they
Correct.
they remain the same. The second thing is that knowing and understanding the product and the service that you're selling, really getting into the depth of what the life cycle of that product or the customer journey is becomes imperative. And whether it's a consumer product or whether it's a B2B product, getting that understanding of what the customer journey is becomes imperative. So I think this is another basic principle that remains the same for both sets of marketing. The third thing increasingly that we talk about, even in B2B, because for a long time there were debates, does segmentation even matter in B2B? Does it not? Do you have a homogeneous group and not? All of those kind of things, but it definitely does. Especially when I look at Tally, right? I mean, if you look at our addressable market, it really is 63 million businesses, right? I mean, there as many number of MSMEs in the country, and it's so diverse. They're not just the demographic differences, but there's so many psychographic differences amongst them, the segment, everything. Yeah. So the difference that you find between B2C, B2B in that sense is that you don't have a primary and secondary customer, or the consumer. In B2B, really, the world is your customer. Like when I'm working with Tally, I have the existing users, because the whole thing around retention of
Mm.
customers becomes very important, right? The second aspect is with respect to the influencers, that who's helping you make the decision in buying a product, right? So really that becomes a very important segment to market to as well. And the third one is of course the prospects, that how do you attract and acquire more customers in your franchise, right? So that is where I think that the differences really are. But yeah, the
Awesome.
understanding with respect to your consumer user, your customer journey, and the product and service depth remains the key.
You got it. Got it. Yeah, I think it is really, really first principles, get the product, understand the customer, and segment them, right?
Yeah.
So I think while it seems easy, I feel a lot of people get so spoiled with all these jargons and strategies and courses and articles, everybody puts out, and they genuinely forget what I should do for my customer versus, hey, this is what the world's doing, so I should, just
Yeah.
copy paste that.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that. Another thing I noticed is you were handling PNL and you kept on talking about how you had profitable growth. In all these companies you've led, profitable growth. When a marketer says that, I personally feel it's rare because when I look at the fintech space or even CPG or the new D2C, right? It's just you see these brands who are known and they're popular, but when you look at their balance sheets, it's looking pretty scary. So I'm just, and I'm a startup, and I've been around a lot of other startup founders, and I can tell you it's something which is a big question mark for people, that let's do this, ek din aega profit, and that 90% of the times doesn't happen. So anything you've learned from a marketing standpoint, things you need to do to have that profitability engine when you're marketing your product.
Right. Right. Interesting question, because the way you see things running right now, obviously there are a lot of naysayers, but at the same time, I think it's very dependent on the life stage of your company, of your
Mhm.
product, right? So every business doesn't start off with a positive, a P&L or good EBITDA. It all depends on what your threshold is or what is the limit to which you stretch it,
Mhm.
right? Because end of the day, unless you make that investment, you can't expect to achieve any awareness or usage of your product or service. So there definitely has to be a balance, and that is why I think even from a business case, which is not just on Excel, but it has and the scenarios which are drawn out,
Mhm.
right? And that's a typical way you run your business. You have scenarios out, well, pessimistic or realistic or optimistic kind of scenarios, and you draw those out and you figure out what does it require to get to a certain level. So I'm really not commenting on the the startups as such, really. I think because a lot of them have shown that there is a path to profitability,
Mhm.
right? And some of the founders do believe very firmly in it, and they've gone with that belief as well. So like I said, that it's all a matter of how strongly you build the foundation of your business and your company. What are the levers that you're really working with and strengthening, and of course then what is your risk appetite? So there's no set formula to it all, honestly speaking. I think it all depends on what the risk appetite is and what is the long term horizon that you see.
Mhm.
But my in my own journey and in my own conditioning across the traditional MNCs and all has been that, yeah, you have to look at profitable growth, otherwise you
Yeah.
just become unsustainable, right? And then you close down. So what's the point? Because you have to earn to invest,
Yeah.
right? Because you can't be dependent for a very long time all on external capital. So you really have to reach a point where you earn to invest in your business and then grow. So that really, to my mind, that has always stuck. That has always been a fundamental. But there are people who always have had a much larger and a long-termish risk appetite. Yeah, we'll do it for 10 years and sometime we'll, umeed pe dunya kayam hai kind of stuff. So I think it's a very, like I said, in today's day and age, yeah, if you're lucky, you have very supportive investors and things, and you go on with promises. But ultimately, I think it's about having those strong foundation.
Yeah.
Whether your product is great or not, whether you've got your operational model right or not, and whether you have a good talent stream which can
Yeah.
lead you and drive you there. So it really is
Absolutely.
all about that.
I feel, especially in SaaS and BFSI, I see a lot of people delaying product market fit by over juicing their marketing budgets. I
Yeah.
think I don't know which one of the Karma brothers said it. One of them said it in a podcast, and I found that very interesting. That your product may be decent,
Yeah.
but if you are going to price it at a certain point, and the customer never pays that amount for the first 3 years till your funding is there, you'd never really know if your price point in your entire marketing mix is correct or not. So I think that's what
Absolutely.
I'm hearing, that your fundamentals need to be tested. You can't
Mm.
just throw money at it to solve a
Yeah.
product problem or a user
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, because that's the thing. When I look at Tally and we have this internal discussion, I really have a lot of respect for the founders. I mean, for 37 years being the market leader is a great deal.
Right.
But the thing, and I'll probably talk more about it in with your subsequent perhaps questions. But there was not the traditional marketing route that they picked. It really rested when they started the business. Really rested on the power of the product, right? And the product really spoke for itself.
Mhm.
So that is what the thing. See, no consumer or customer is stupid enough to pay or continuously pay for a product where they stop seeing value in. So marketing
Right.
therefore has only as much role. Marketing can get you to use the product, but it can't get you to continuously keep using the product, right? So if at the first, and that is why it's a thing of first moment and second moment of truth, right? You see the product, you buy it, that's the first moment of truth. When you use it, that's the second moment of truth. And at the second moment of truth, if you're letting down the customer, boss, you've had it, right? So that's the fundamental. Really have the belief and invest in what you're selling. Yeah, it can evolve, it can improve, no doubt about it, but yeah. That's definitely important.
It's a good segue for me now. So, as you said, you've been around for decades, and definitely there's a clear first mover advantage. Tally's had, but on a literally on a daily basis, in the fintech space and SaaS space, there are new companies which launch, and being very candid with you, a lot of founders think that I want to be modern and new and cool, and I want like a Y Combinator startup. I'll use, even if they are like 1 year old and they have no
Yeah.
proof of their
Yeah.
pudding. How does so while you have an advantage, you also have a disadvantage of it being perceived as a legacy brand, which means it's a
True.
kind of an old brand. So
Yeah.
for any marketer probably who's working in a legacy brand and are facing stiff competition from new players, what's the
Yes.
strategy you've employed which helps you solve this particular perception in consumers?
Right. Oh, again, a great question. And I first want to bust this myth that Tally had the first mover advantage. Because this is before I joined the company, even I used to think so. But the fact of the matter is that when Tally launched, there were already a lot of accounting softwares in the market. In fact, while after they'd launched also some really big names in the IT sector, they had launched an accounting thing also with way more marketing budget and things like that, but they couldn't really make a headway, right? And that I think is where the power which I was talking about, the power of the product and the connect with the customer really lay, right? End of the day, what is it that the customer wants? And I'm not just talking about here and now today, but when you actually think about 35 years ago, when you're right. I mean, the quantum of competition is a lot higher now, much bigger now. But then also you had
Right.
competitors. But the thing that matters to the customer is how great is the product that I'm using. And the second thing is how good is the service, because IT, and I'm talking about the time when there were no computers, right? I
Mhm.
mean, people were using assembled computers. Tally actually led to automation in the segment, I would
Mhm.
say. Because see, for a small business owner, managing the bahi khata, the daily books of accounts
Yeah.
is a huge chore. And when they finally found something that could really do it or bring order to their chaos, or
Mhm.
rather adapt itself to their chaos, that was a revelation. So it was the product differentiation that really made the initial difference, right? Because I'll give you simple examples, right? There are four things that Tally stands for, okay? And there's a thing around simplicity, that the product has to be like super simple for anybody to work on and learn and all of those things. Second is flexibility. Like one of the famous sayings by the founder of the company, when so sorry, I'll just take a step back and give you a little bit of a story about the company, right? So Mr. Shamsundar Goenka was the founder, and his son is Bharat Goenka, right? Mr. Shamsundar Goenka had a business of textiles, and his son had interest in coding. So computers, although he was a mathematics graduate and all of that, but dad got him a comp and he said, okay, fine, I'll do code. And dad said, "Ki, why don't you make a software for me to, manage my accounts?" And then he made something, and so many times the father just said, this is useless. What you're doing is useless. And then a famous statement that he'd made was that if I want to drive a car, I want to be the driver and not the mechanic. That had a lot of depth, that I don't want to know you are coding from your standpoint ki technical way mein aise hi coding hogi. So you're not thinking about what the user wants. The moment he said that, the it's Bharat Goenka, he changed his approach, and then he figured after talking to his own dad and people around, कि अच्छा कैसे होता है. The simple thing, like in all the forms, when you have to put a date, you either have DDMMYY, right? So there's a set format. In Tally, when you have to put a date, you can put 1st August, you can put August 1st, you can put the year first, it'll just take it,
Mhm.
right? So, I mean, this is a simple thing of ki
Yeah.
I'm not getting bound. So, in effect, it was the first codeless product, right? So, the
Mhm.
moment people started seeing that it is so simple and I don't have to learn computers or learn any undergo through, any technical courses and all to run this product. I'll just use it. I don't have to learn Excel. I don't have to learn other things. I just get started and, make my invoices and ledgers and all these things on the fly. So I think that is where it all started, and I think that is how it is continued, because the focus has always been on making the product really simple, flexible, being very very accurate in the way it delivers the data, and of course speed. My finance data, if I keep waiting for it to load,
Yeah.
it's and for a businessman, the financial data is most important. And the last thing is security, that nobody can access tally data. There have been times when, ID people have come to us and they've asked, and we're like, we don't have access because there's a concept of tally vault. Once the data is lost, it's lost. Even we can't retrieve it. So I think this is the foundation. These are the strong pillars, right, on which the product philosophy was built. And then, of course, getting the entire ecosystem to tell them about. So it was very experiential at that point in time. You did demos, you showed them how it worked and how it sort of went ahead. Now, coming to, let's say, here and now, so that was a long-winded introduction I gave to the question. But coming to, the thing around it being a legacy brand. So you're right. I think that's definitely a marketing challenge, and we are very cognizant of that as well, right? And I think that is where, which we discuss internally, is also that we didn't keep up with the marketing switches that were happening, at the right points in time. So, for instance, we got our first agency on retail only when we were launching GST. So until 2017, we didn't really have. So we used to, and interestingly, so we've even worked with the legendary RK Lakshman. He's done some creatives for us for our BTL elements, because we
Wow.
never really, except for maybe one newspaper ad and all, there was not much ATL advertising that was ever done. So that 2017 is the first time we had an agency on retainer. So a lot of the things, in terms of the brand building and perception, kind of got a little, I would say a little, they went on the back burner, so to speak. We kept focusing on product and product marketing. But over the last few years, the focus has been on building the brand and the relevance for all types of customers and consumers. One thing, having done everything, one thing that we've realized after a lot of researchers talking to a lot of people is, for a business owner, the sanctity of the financial data remains the ultimate uh, thing. They
Right.
need their data to be accurate. They need it, wherever you've input it, it should rest there. So I think from that standpoint, Tally still stands, and even in all the surveys and all, it still stands head and shoulders above, anybody else. The second thing, and it's an interesting philosophy internally, is that we don't really, and it's not arrogant at all, right? But it is more about that we don't keep looking at the rear view mirror, right? Or we don't keep looking at, okay, who's chasing, who's following us. Our focus has always been on doing right by the customer. So there's certain things. So one other thing that Tejas, who's the MD of the company, he says is that we don't necessarily want to be the first to the market, but we want to be the best to the market, right? So you may have a lot of solutions, and that's a debate. That's an ongoing debate, right? I mean, today's day and age, you'll say, oh, but the cost of reacquiring the customer will be huge and all. But the point again is the same, that if it works like magic every time, then even if somebody is on something else, they would be tempted or forced to move back to the product. So, given all of that, the experiential marketing, working on the product offering, remains at the core of what we do. From a marketing standpoint, however, to have a much larger, or a better connect with the new age entrepreneurs, has also been to really show them the reality of how the product is, right? And that's the reason, and I think media has given us that pathway as well. through digital media and the kind of content that you do, the jadedness of the brand, oh, it's a legacy brand, my dad used to use that and all of that, and you're obviously breaking that down.
Yeah.
That, it may be an old brand and a product, but it's not irrelevant from any standpoint, otherwise we still wouldn't be the market leaders, right?
Right.
Because and if you're just going by perception, then that is a perception we're working on breaking down. That it does everything that you need, and it does it wonderfully. You want dashboards, you get dashboards. And ultimately the influencers, which are either your accountant or even in ICI it's still taught as a subject, you learn those and you keep working on that. So a lot of our communication efforts have been going in the realm of really the brand building, moving from being just an accounting software to actually a technology company, right?
Mm.
Because the kind of technology work that happens
Mm.
within the company is phenomenal. I call myself technically unsound. I'm not very musical when it comes to technology as much. But there's some things that I see, and the teams and the youngsters who are working on this, kind of database building or the product architecture, which is not built on a regular script, right? It's that Tally's own language that we're building it on. It's really phenomenal because the experience that it gives is something phenomenal. I mean, people are not really working on SME AI, right? I mean, you think of AI as a much broader, it's beyond our reach. But how are we bringing AI to SMEs
Mm.
uh, in the product? I mean, those are the solutions that we're currently working on, right? So I think the perception is something that we're they're pondering, but the market share data obviously tells us that we're okay.
Thank you so much for sharing this story. I personally, I never knew that. And I think, as you said, customer experience and I believe data security, you stuck to that. It reminds me of something like a WhatsApp.
Mhm.
I have come across so many chat apps which have these 100 things on it.
Yeah,
But WhatsApp does, one, two things very nicely.
correct.
And it still is the market leader for that reason,
True.
despite of them not having those. I remember there was this hike from India which had these millions
Hmm.
of features, and they were
Yes,
spending so
yes.
much money on
Correct.
marketing, and they all look like really cool features.
Yeah,
You could like
yeah.
protect the chat, you could send stickers, you could do payments, you could, it's so many things, but didn't end up working out because at the end of the day people just want the first, those core things which are
Yes,
important to them.
absolutely. Absolutely. You just
um,
want that thing to get done,
right,
beautifully. You
right,
don't want
right.
to make compromises on that. Yeah.
Right. I went to a commerce college and I do have a lot of people who use what you do. And because, as a founder of a marketplace, I come across a lot of companies who tell me about their new, SaaS software, and I keep on forwarding it to my friends. While it
Mm.
looks cool to them, what they realize is they're like, dude, my CA is telling me, what is this? It doesn't work. The
Yeah.
formatting is bad, or it just doesn't give me the data the way I need it to. So
Yes.
it's like almost like putting lipstick on a pig. Sometimes it's all what a lot of other tools are doing, but at the core, I think is something which you folks have cracked very very well, and it's integrated very well into the entire ecosystem.
That's
So
true.
kudos to you and the entire team for
Yeah.
that.
In fact, I've done, a case study with one of when I am prof, and he teaches strategy, and there was a case study which was done on Tally as a platform.
Mhm.
So while we ourselves, and it's a very, and it's a company which is really grounded in their purpose and values. I mean, honestly, for me, coming from all this, I mean, since it's been a very to use a very cliched and a very irritating word, which I find very humbling in that sense, right? Because there are a lot of things that I had to unlearn, and one of the things is that we call ourselves a product company, right? But really, it's a obviously an IT technology company, but it's really a platform. So that prof, when I was going through that entire case study and the way it worked out, it really is about connecting the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because in connected commerce these days, I mean that there's so many things, and there's already so much on the mind of a business person and the accountant, and with the whole compliance nature changing. Yeah, you need something that just works and you can rely on it. So that trustworthiness, I think, has been a biggest differentiator for us.
Absolutely. Now jumping into, I think you mentioned some time ago that a lot of people perceive B2B marketing as boring, and I personally feel it's a really underrated area. And I'm really trying. I don't even think, unfortunately, a lot of formal schools also teach it. Like, account based marketing, or how, thought leadership works. It's something somebody has to learn by themselves. However, I'm seeing a shift. I'm seeing
Hmm.
a lot of brands investing into storytelling, and I see that you also, collaborated with like folks like TVF. It's pretty cool. I saw the blurb about the whole meeting room chatter, and I love that you addressed, the concern head on.
Yes.
So I really like that. But what I wanted to ask you is, in B2B marketing, however, one thing, and I think it should be for all kinds of marketing, but especially in B2B marketing, attribution and its contribution to revenue is very important. Like, if it doesn't move that needle, don't do it.
True.
So what's your stance, with doing something like your collaboration with TVF? How do you really attribute that into, revenue, basically?
So, like I was mentioning, for any kind of marketing efforts that you put in,
Mm.
it does have to break down into your, awareness, brand building sort of campaigns, which over a and which has always been a challenge for marketer, right? That how do you drive the ROI for brand building versus
Yeah.
the demand generation, lead generation campaigns that you do, which have a very clear ROI. You look at the CPL and cost of acquisition and all of that. So the way we work is we've now, kind of split it. We know that there has to be concerted effort on brand building, and that is what you see a lot of the B2B brands doing. This
Mm.
whole thing around thought leadership or working with influencers or key opinion leaders, being on various platforms, and these days there's no dearth of the kind of events, etc., that we see happening where you're representing your brand or your opinion on generally the state of economy to AI to anything and everything, right? So I think the breaking down of the marketing objectives,
Mm.
in terms of what really is important in that point in time for a brand is critical when you're planning your marketing budgets and the way you look at ROI as well. So at Tally, our issue is not awareness, right? Our issue, because we have 99% people know about Tally, right? The important thing is how do you get into or make sure that you are in the preference set and you get into the usage part of it.
Mm.
So that is the aspect which we cater to through a lot of our demand generating campaigns, like very specific on the product functionalities or things that people are looking out for or seeking when they're starting a business and things like that. On the other hand, the previous thing that we were talking about around the legacy perception, all of those kind of things, which is around brand building and thought leadership, that
Mm.
you want to pivot, you want to change. We're not an accounting software only. We really are a business, management software, and it's an IT company that creates technologies, both from an external or rather as an employer. We are talking to the young engineers and all that. There's a place where real technology work happens, and,
Right.
and which can impact millions of businesses, right? In that sense. So what, therefore, that whole thing around the perception change, brand building, thought leadership, that is one area of budgeting. So that is how we've been keeping at it, and that is how the whole work with the TVF, for
Mm.
instance, happened, or even Shark Tank, because
Right.
again the marketing objective is to have the connect with maybe the younger audience and not to be seen as a boring B2B company. No,
Right.
B2B marketing, like I said, it's not boring. It can be super exciting when you're working with a set of really exciting segments. MSMEs, the diversity itself is so exciting. When you
Right.
work with influencers, a different type of CAs, and we did a CA event recently, and the diversity of thinking and approach to new technology, etc. It was just fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So I think end of the day, yeah, it's all about where you want to focus. And from a B2B standpoint, brand building remains just as important as anything else, right? I may the awareness, like I said, awareness may be very high, but just having awareness is not enough. What are the brand attributes or values for which you are recognized? That becomes important. I don't want to be just a trustworthy brand. I also want to be a brand that moves with the times or is relevant to any age group.
Right.
So I have to make sure that the needle moves there, right? So looking at what are the brand attributes that are important to you as a company, and therefore focusing on what would it take to move the needle there. And the second thing, not take your eyes off from the revenue sources and
Right.
how you can maximize that. So I think that is where the business thinking comes and is important as well, because yeah, marketers right now in today's day and age cannot only be the brand building marketeers. They have to wear the cap or hat of being or having their radar up on overall business and
Yeah.
revenue growth as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned Shark Tank. I know you sponsored Shark Tank Bangladesh, and I know that Tally is a global product. I was keen to know, for somebody who's marketing to the world now, how is it different to, or rather, is it different for you to market in India versus outside India? And if you could share some nuances.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it cannot be one size fits all or one positioning that can work across, right? And this is something that we've learned because different markets have different nuances, and in the markets where we, like, let's say, haven't been there for a very long time. So for instance, in Middle East Africa, we've been around for a very long time, and it's the second largest business, and we're, I think, driving the MSME penetration there as well.
Mhm.
uh, but in the markets like Bangladesh, in markets like Kenya, or some segments in the US, they're obviously where we don't have the first mover or early mover advantage, so to speak, right? A brand is not known, right? So the first focus in those markets really is to build the brand identity, right? And that is the reason, because although we've been in Bangladesh for a few years already, but it was more about getting the on ground understanding, training of the people and teams and partners, etc., sorted. But I think right now is a good time for us to start investing in the brand and communication and driving that awareness. And it came at a time which we thought that could lend to starting off with the building or creating the imagery as a smart, relevant, one stop shop for all your business management requirements. And thinking about that, we got into the whole Shark Tank partnership. For other markets, also like in Kenya, it's important to understand what works there. So
Mhm.
one of the things when I was talking to the team there and our agency there, like in India, we've noticed, right, that any kind of communication which either is very emotional, and that connect people connect kind of thing, that works a lot. In Kenya, that doesn't matter. In Kenya, it's all about just being like the fun, because the hustle thing is very high there. And therefore we felt, oh, that's an insight for us, that when you're working with Tally, you can really do your hustle without any hassle, because you have something that just takes care of your business. So I think understanding again what is the cultural or cultural fabric of the country, what works there in terms of not just the product needs, but also in the way you communicate with them. Who are the influencers? What are their triggers or barriers? I think getting an understanding of all of those have been important, and that is why we've done dedicated studies in Kenya, Bangladesh, and all of those things, which have now led to us getting to our marketing campaigns and communication strategies.
Any reason you picked Kenya and Bangladesh as geographies? Is there a data point where MSMEs are increasing, or any insight?
So Bangladesh definitely one, of course, is the whole the proximity and the similar accounting and compliance
Ah,
sort of environment. In Kenya, one definitely the Indian diaspora that helps, no doubt. In Africa in general, right?
hmm,
So having Kenya and then looking at, because we have, like, we're sold in over 100 countries, but our presence is in four regions, so to speak,
hmm,
right? Middle East, Saudi, with the office in Dubai. Then you have Bangladesh, of course, India, and then Nairobi in Kenya,
hmm,
right? So that has been the idea, that where you have a good diaspora, you have a good partner network. So
hmm,
initially, we just figured that there were a lot of partners who worked very deeply with us, and they've gone and settled there, and
hmm.
they just said that, we want to run this business for that zone and that area, and
Got
gradually
it.
I think that that's how it sort of built up.
Awesome, awesome, got it. Um, we spoke a lot about I think doing a bunch of things in marketing, and a big part of that is content. A lot of marketers today again have a lot of advice that you should do in-house, or you should do outsourcing.
Yeah.
What's usually your preference? Like, what do you end up outsourcing, what do you end up doing in-house?
So I think for us also it's a mix. We run a mix of uh, in-house and retainer based marketing.
Mm,
Um, and is should there be a thumb rule? To my mind, not really. It
mm,
again depends on what kind of product or space you're in. So for instance, most of our written content all happens in house. The
mm,
reason for that is that our domain understanding
mm,
is very critical, right? And you can't have somebody who doesn't understand domain, and the user expectations and requirements to be able to write that content really well,
yeah.
right? So for our entire content writing team is in house. So that is a requirement, because we tried with a few agencies, we tried, but we figured that we're just not getting the depth, and that is critical. For a lot of our creative campaigns, we definitely seek help from various kind of media agencies. Some were on retainer, but now we also do projectized work with agencies. On the whole brand work, we prefer sticking with one at the strategy level. So I think it has been a bit of both experimentation. Like for social media, we have a dedicated agency,
Got it.
because there it's also important. It's there's a learning curve
Mm,
for an agency partner to understand what our tone of voice is, what our priorities in terms of our messaging needs to be, what are the things that click. So there's a learning curve. So I
yeah.
think now with we have Social Panga as our social media marketing agency, and Touchwood, yeah, the partnership has been going really well in terms of the creative, and there's a lot of content that we churn out, right? I mean,
Okay.
just the number of videos that we create, be it simple how to troubleshooting kind of videos to engagement videos for the partners to share with their
Mm,
prospects.
mhm.
It's immense. So I have an in-house
Got it.
team, roughly about 10 people, but we also work with agencies externally.
Got it. So from what I hear, like domain expertise and speed is in-house, but special campaigns and expertise, with a certain kind of caliber of talent would probably be project or retainer basis with the agency.
Absolutely.
On the agency one, Jayati, a lot of, so we are a network of studios, agencies, and independent consultants in the creative realm.
Mm.
All of them tune into this podcast. So if you had to, let's say, give your opinion on what separates a great agency from a good agency, could
Hmm.
you share your 2 cents?
Ah. So one thing and this is my personal view. One thing I've observed is that while the strategy, a lot of people do get right, right? When we're thinking about a brand campaign, and I'm talking about the larger campaigns part, people do get the strategy right, but I think creativity is where I've seen not tremendously great work happening, unfortunately, right? And
Mm.
when I talk about creativity, see, it's such a subjective thing, right? I mean, something I like black, you may like yellow.
Right.
It's very different, some copy that really clicks with me, and it's also the age group. I mean, my daughters, the English they speak, boss, I don't understand, so you don't know what clicks with so it's interesting. It's a subjective matter. Having said that, I think the important thing that we look for, or at least I look for in an agency, is the keenness to understand your brand and the product category. Again, depending on whether it's a product campaign, whether it's a brand campaign, getting an understanding becomes very, very important. What are the values, attributes that you're trying to drive, and what the tone of voice needs to be, etc., etc. And similarly for the product, what is it that you really are wanting to get out? And the second element definitely is the creativity, not just in terms of the copy, but also in terms of the visual representation. Because
Mhm.
sometimes, my thing is that what is it that can get me to stop and say that, oh yeah, this is Tally, versus that if I just replace the name and you put any other brand also, it could well be some other brand, right? so
Right.
so that that ability to bring out that differentiation even in the creative is something that we seek. And last, of course, is the turnaround time and the nimbleness of the agency.
Superb, superb. Well put. I agree with all of them. I now want to talk about content production, but with the lens of AI. It's something which is almost a threat to a lot of content
Mhm.
creators and agencies, and it's also a point of, I don't know. I wouldn't. How do I put it? It's like a lot of marketeers are not sure also of how AI is going to revamp their production stack, right? Have you dabbled with AI in the marketing function? If so, in what all areas, and how do you think it's going to shape content production?
Yeah. So in fact, I was having this discussion with my team, and especially the creative team, right? I mean, because a lot of times we work on creating logos and things like that. And I mean, I won't at this point in time call them experts in having an understanding of all the AI tools available, but the ones that they have also dabbled with, I mean, it's still not giving you, like I said, the creative angle or the sensibility to understand the brand nuances.
Mhm.
That is something that AI will not be able to replace, to my mind, honestly. So in a lot of the content writing space, yes, you have to churn articles after articles. All of those things are fine. You can get the basic construct and everything, but you still need human intervention to make sure that your brand tonality comes out in it in a clear manner. Like
Mhm.
again, the same point that I made, that it can't be that you replace Tally and you put any other
Yeah.
product or company or anything, and it holds the same. You it it still needs to be relevant or true to the brand values and the tone. And same with the visual creative and content area as well.
Mhm.
There also you can put in something, you can get some ideas, perhaps inspiration, but I think ultimately what you want to communicate through your own understanding of the brand through a visual, it will not be that easy to
Mm.
replace at that point in time. So these are the two areas where we looked at and worked with and on. But even to my teams, I tell them the same thing, that it may seem easy. uh, I have to put out five blogs by end of this week. You can get it, but sooner or later we'll be able to tell that
Right.
this is chat GPT output, or is it something that has your own touch. So you have to have your signature.
Totally. I mean, I'm an expert in understanding how is chat GPT or not, because the number of portfolios I get and the amount of content I review in a day, I'm like, okay, this is off ChatGPT on a
Yes.
3-word prompt. I can
Correct.
see through it.
Correct. Absolutely.
One of the podcasts, we were discussing, and it really resonates with what you just said is, AI is the answer, but what's the question? Like that's so
Correct.
important.
Correct. That is so.
It's almost like you have a AI is an extremely effective best intern who is enthusiastic and fast, but
Yeah.
doesn't have context because they have zero
Correct.
experience.
Correct.
So I think the context setting, whoever we talk about, be it a creative person, a marketer, a business person, knowing your context, which all comes back to the first part, right? Understanding your customer,
Absolutely.
understanding your product.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
that's going to be very difficult to take away.
You're right.
So yeah, really, really resonated with what you just said. Coming to the last question now, we've actually crossed our time.
Yeah.
so, so I want to, just talk about the last part. So a lot of, founders and founding teams, usually watch our podcast. We also end up working with a lot of young startups, and I think everybody's struggling with 0 to 1, right? Marketing is such a vast subject, and there are so many people who recommend so many things. They're always confused, right? Like, should I just put an ads? Should I just do email? Should I just
Yeah.
have a social media page? They're pretty
Yeah.
confused. So I want to maybe take an example like BFSI. It's the closest to what you're currently doing. If somebody's building in that space, they're doing 0 to 1. Could you share your, based on your expertise, could you share what go to market bets should they take while doing 0 to 1?
Yeah. See, other thing that I tell people is that, everybody knows marketing. You'll get opinion and ideas from everybody, right?
Right.
Uh, but it's not um, sensible or easy to churn the ocean, So prioritization becomes very, very important. I do believe that trial, and I am a believer in learning by hit and trial, and I'm also a believer in pilots. Yeah, doing like a test first to figure out whether something is working or not. So
Mm,
if you're unsure about, that they're like a list of 20 things that could potentially, first is being clear about what is it that you want to drive. Is it that, again, like I said, is it really at the top level thing of driving curiosity and
mm,
awareness for your brand, product, or whatever? Or is it that people that somewhere you managed to get, but you really have to now drive home your points of differentiation? So you really have to therefore figure out what your key objectives are. And in those areas, what seem to be the best vehicles, so to
mm,
speak, right? Like that's how influencer marketing came about, right? That you realized, and for us, we've been doing it for 35 years now. The whole influencer marketing thing with the CAs, and it wasn't in B2C, and it wasn't even heard of, or even the doctors for that matter, right? So I think that the point being that you focus, you list down what are the things there, and then figure out, maybe talk to a few people, talk to few of your target audience. So one thing that we do a lot of is to understand what is the media consumption like. So everybody will tell you these days everybody is on Insta, especially if it's a youngish kind of a product category and all. To figure out that, okay, if I'm on Instagram and they're also the content size, so it has to be slightly, and that is where this whole thing about creativity or the type of content that you're creating comes in, right?
right.
That how are you grabbing those eyeballs,
Mm,
right? So you do something like that. Now in social media marketing also, I mean, there's so many things you can do on Facebook. Again, it comes back to knowing your customer.
mm,
Where are they? Which platform are they on? And what is the kind of content that they're consuming?
mm,
Are they following certain people or handles and
mm,
things like that? Then that is that whole algorithm that you work with to promote or sponsor. In restaurant business, you see all these leaflets and pamphlets that come, but over a period of time people are saying that, oh, we don't take physical newspaper. But that same thing in a tier 2 city will work really well, because
right.
there, people are still reading physical newspapers, right? The circulation is still higher. So, understanding the media consumption patterns of your target audience, and then figuring out, basis your marketing objective, where does that fit. Do not shy away from doing maybe trials and pilots. Do it at a maybe a slightly smaller scale. Get the proof of your concept and then execute. The challenge with that, unfortunately, is that I don't have that much time. I can't. So somewhere it has to give way. So that is a call that you as a founder or as a team will need to take, whether you want to burn money one shot and see it, or you're okay waiting for a little bit of time and do it really well. I belong to the maybe my age or vintage, but I belong to take your time to understand the concept and then move forward.
Awesome. No, I think thank you so much for such an elaborate answer. I usually get very generic ones, but I think you really created a framework around this. So I love that. Thank you so much for that. This brings us to the end of our podcast. I hope you had a good time, Jayati.
I did. Thanks, Kavan. It was really interesting, and I'm glad we finally did it after a few reschedules. But really enjoyed talking to you.
Awesome, awesome. And for everybody who's stuck along so far, thank you so much for tuning in. If you'd like to hear another marketing leader like Jayati, please like, share, and subscribe. We'll have another episode coming very, very soon.